Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how to configure the pfSense, and this is the rough network diagram that we are going to be working on. Our pfSense has two ports. One is used to connect to the WAN, which is also the internet, and the other port is used to connect to the LAN. In this case we'll be using a Windows 10 machine and we'll be skipping the switch, so the second port of the pfSense would be connected directly to the PC. So let's deploy a new pfSense and a new Windows machine. So we'll give it the name pfSense new so that we don't get confused. I'm using my own data store, and the operating system is Linux. For CPU, we can leave it as it is or we can change it. So I'm going to give it 1 GB of memory. So the other thing that we need to do here is to add a second network port, because as we can see in the diagram, we have like one port is used for WAN and the other port is used for LAN, and in this case we only have one network port, so we need to add the another one. So I'll just go and add the other network port. And we have both the network port. So for the first one, we'll select your user ID and 01 for the first one, and for the second one we'll go with the 02 and make sure like both of those are connected. Then we'll go on and give the setup file, the setup file for the ISO file for the pfSense. So we'll go in through the ISO and select the pfSense ISO file, and we're going to use the latest one, which is 2.7.2, and it is connected at power on, and that should be all for the initial configuration. Now we just need to run this pfSense. So power it on, and it's booting. Accept the license and agreement, install. We'll use the auto partition and proceed with install. We don't have any RAID configuration, so we just go with no redundancy. And for this step we need to select the virtual disk where the pfSense will be installed, and to select the device, we only have like one storage device or the one hard disk. We just press space to select the device and press enter, and it just says like, do you want to destroy everything on the disk before we continue the setup? So we'll say yes, and we'll just wait for it to complete. And this is reboot. is doing some initial configuration for us, so we'll just have to wait until it's completed. Then we'll do some changes to the configuration according to this diagram. So the IP, we are not going to use the same IP that is given over here, we'll use our own. So we'll just make some changes, but the base network diagram or the network topology would be the same as shown in this picture. And it's configured. So the first thing that we are going to do is to assign the interface. As you can see on this diagram, the first port is used for WAN, so that's what we are going to do. We are going to assign, so we're going to press 1 to assign interface, and it says like, do you want to set up the VLANs right now? So we can just say no for now. And in my case it says EM, so in your case the interface name might be different. So the EM0 is the first interface that we have in my pfSense, so we'll just select that one for the WAN interface. It just says enter the WAN interface, so I'm going to select the EM0. And it says for the LAN interface, select our interface or leave it for auto detection. So in this diagram we can see that there's a second port too for the LAN, so we'll just use the second port for the LAN, which is EM1. And we can see over here, so the LAN is assigned to EM0, sorry, the WAN is assigned to EM0 and LAN is assigned to EM1, which is basically the EM0 and EM1 is the port in the pfSense firewall. So we'll just proceed with the configuration. And it's just finishing up the settings and reloading the firewall, so we'll just have to wait for a minute. Okay, that's done now. So the our first step to assign the port is done. So the next step we are going to do is configure our WAN and WAN port. So we are going to assign an IP to the WAN port. In this case we'll use our own network ID, so we'll press 2 to set interface IP address, and we'll say 1 because we are configuring the WAN IP address right now. And it says do we want to configure the WAN IP via DHCP, so we'll say I think we're going to say no for now. So it says to give it a new WAN IP address, so my conestoga my network IP provided by the conestoga is 10.175.22, so I'm just going to use the 10.175.22 and give it something that I've never used before. So you could give it as 01 or 02 or just 1, 2, 3, any number. So I'm going to use 65 in my case, and the subnet max would be 24. And so this is where it gets a little bit tricky. It says like for WAN, enter the new WAN IP before gateway address, which is basically our gateway address. So we'll just assign 175.22.1, which is the gateway for my network. So you'll give it the ID or the network IP that you have for your network, and just press enter, and we'll say yes, use this as a default gateway. And we are not going to configure the IPv6 because that is not required. Enter for none. And we want to enable DHCP server, no, because we are configuring the DHCP via static IP, so we do not need the DHCP server and WAN. And it just says, do we want to revert to the HTTP protocol? So you can just say yes or no. It really doesn't matter, for me at least. And it's done. So next thing we are going to do is configure the LAN IP address. So again, going back to the picture, we have the second port that is connected to the switch and the PC. In our case, we are going to connect this port directly to the PC. We don't have a switch, so we'll assign a LAN IP to the second port. So let's configure the WAN interface. We'll go to DHCP, configure by DHCP, no, and we're going to assign 192.168.1.1. network will be 24-bit, and for WAN, enter the new LAN IPv4 gateway address. Should be 192.168.1.1. For LAN, we'll just skip it for now. Configure IPv6, no. Do you want to enable DHCP server on LAN? Yes. And say begin from 192.168.5 and end on 192.168.1. say 30. And so as far as the configuration for the pfSense, it is done. So we'll go back to our vSphere and create a new Windows machine. For this one, I'm just going to deploy one from a template. So I'm deploying a Windows 10 template. So I give it a name, Windows 10 and new. So I'll just wait for it to finish configuring. Then we'll change some settings on this VM. So I'll go to settings, and the part that I would like to change is the network port. So for this network, since we are connecting the PC to the LAN of the pfSense, we are going to have to connect it to the second port that we assign, which is the network 02 that we used on the pfSense while we configured it. So it has to be network 2. So we'll just change that, and I think that's pretty much everything that we need to do on this one. So we'll just turn it on. And it's a web console. Okay, so and we have a connection. So we'll open up a command prompt and see if we are able to ping the gateway, which we are able to do it. So we'll open a new Internet Explorer and see if we can open the firewall. The firewalls, what do we say, the web console or the web GUI. So we'll go to http://192.168.1.1 and we can log in. So our username is pfsense and password I don't remember, should be pfsense. No, sense. I don't remember the ID password for this one. And from the web GUI, okay, admin and pfsense, admin pfsense, and we are logged in. So for this configuration that we have done, we can like override the configuration through here. So we'll just follow through the web console, check next, and give it a host name. We're going to leave it as it is. We can change the domain, so I can name it to my name, say slimboot2046.com. and for the DNS server we can assign Google's DNS, so we'll have an internet access. For time zone, I'm going to leave it as it is. And for the WAN interface, we already have the static IP configured, so it should pop up over here. This is our gateway address. It doesn't show the upstream gateway. We'll just add the gateway, which is the gateway of our network ID, which is, for my case, it's 175.22, and the gateway for me is 1, so I just placed 1 over there. And so for this one we'll have to uncheck the block private network entering from WAN, because in our case, if you go back to this picture, we can see it says like the WAN has a public IP, and the WAN basically is the internet. So anything that comes through the internet has a public IP. But in our case, since we are working inside the Conestoga's domain, we have a private IP over here. And if we do not uncheck this, firewall rule, any connection that is coming inside the firewall, in our case, is blocked, because we are using the private IP address, which starts from 10.172.174, anything that we have. So that's the reason we have to uncheck this firewall rule, and we'll just continue with this setup. We'll leave everything as it is, and this is our LAN IP address and the subnet marks, and here you can change the default admin web GUI password, so I'm not going to change it for now. And since everything is done, we'll just reload the firewall, and it says the reloading is in progress. So if we go back here, we should see that the firewall is reloading. Okay, that's fine. Okay, it's already done. So just finish the configuration, and that's everything for configuring the Windows machine and the pfSense firewall. So next we are going to do is to create okay, that's my Windows machine. So next we are going to do is do a port forwarding to allow a remote desktop connection. So for this we'll need the IP address of this machine, which is 104, and we need to enable remote desktop. So we'll go to remote desktop settings and just press or toggle this button to enable the remote connection. Confirm, and it's enabled. So now for the firewall, what we need to understand is let me see if I can find image so we can relate. So I don't see the perfect image, so we are going to use the same image. So in this case, our system has the IP address of 1. I think it's 1.104, and the picture has 100, so it's 104. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to access the remote desktop from outside the internet. So if we are trying to connect to a WAN IP, if we are using a public IP, anything that is inside the network, like the LAN IP, is not accessible through the internet. So in order to access this device securely from outside the internet, we'll need to create a port forwarding rule, which we are going to do it in the pfSense. So what it does is, whenever we have a connection that is requested to this device through the internet, it will just pass it through to the device using the we are not going to use the LAN IP when we are requesting the RDP session from outside the network. So we are going to use the WAN IP and say, like, to forward the traffic into the pfSense, through the pfSense into the PC. So let's just do that first. So next we are going to do the port forwarding. So to do the port forwarding, we'll go to firewall, NAT, and we come to the port forwarding options. Here you can see the port forward. So we'll add a new rule, and what we want to do is to forward the RDP from the WAN interface. So our interface is going to be WAN, the address is IPv4, and protocol we're going to select TCP and UDP because it's coming through the internet. So, and we'll just assign it a custom port, say 4000 for this one, and 4000. Then the redirect target IP, that's where this is the IP address of our Windows machine, so which is 192.168.100.4, and the target port is gonna be for the Microsoft RDP, which is MS RDP, and we'll just give it a description saying RDP allow from WAN, and we'll just use everything as the default and save it. So it says the NAT configuration has been saved, so it says to apply the changes, and then we just need to restart the firewall to make sure everything is configured. So we'll go to maybe it's under diagnostic, diagnostic and reboot, and we'll schedule a normal reboot. As you can see, it's rebooting. So in order to verify if our the port forward is working or not, I'll try to access it through the WAN. Since we are outside the network, since our laptop is sitting somewhere around here in the WAN, so we are going to try and access this PC from our laptop. Say, let's just consider the modem, it's our laptop for now. So we're trying to access the PC which is inside the internal network. We're trying to access it through the WAN. So let's just so for that we are going to use the WAN IP and the port for the RDP. So for this one, since my IP for the firewall is 10.175.22.65, and we created a custom port 4000 to allow the port forward. So we'll just go ahead and try and connect it and see if we'll get a connection. And as you can see, it is asking me to provide a username and password, so we're going to use student and secret 55, and the connection should be successful. And as you can see here, we are logged in to the firewall, or we are logged into the Windows machine. So we'll just log in and see if it's the same Windows machine, or if it's the same pfsense that we just created. So as you can see here is the domain that I gave while we started creating the firewall, and the interface IP is 22.65. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the port forwarding.